when I look at a lot of the suffering that has taken place around my life, a lot of it was directly connected to religion. And I'm not saying this to badger anybody's beliefs or anybody what anybody else has grown up in or whatever anybody else has known. I'm talking about my experience, what I lived and what I saw. And a lot of times, and I'm gonna give you an example. A lot of times, most people that were involved in the belief that I was were very, very dedicated and committed to what they believed. And there were a lot of stipulations as far as what you could wear, what you should eat, what day you should worship, different things like that. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that stuff, because you need to have some order and structure in your life anyway. My only point was that a lot of times things would happen, and it wasn't often, but sometimes maybe you would hear about there being some infidelity in a relationship or something going on. And this is how damning beliefs are. And when you would hear about a situation like that, generally what the overall thought was that the person that was betrayed, based upon a verse in Deuteronomy 28, the person that was betrayed because somehow or another they did something that was made to put them out of alignment with God. And I'm just using this as an example. So in this particular example, the person was betrayed already by the person that they're married to. Now, once the person is betrayed, now the people in the church, the mindset is, or the thought process, or based upon the teaching is, first of all, you can't get divorced, or you shouldn't get divorced. And then the third thought is that you committed some type of sin or something that God caused your spouse to cheat, or whatever the example is. So the point I'm making is that it was a perpetuation of a lot of damage that went on, because nobody ever looked at it and understood from a psychological aspect that when people do things, you can't control what someone else does or that they're going to do or not do. When someone does something, they do it based upon something in them, a lacking in them, a shortness in them. It has nothing to do with the other individual. It has everything to do with the person that actually committed the infraction. So the thing that I'm saying is that perpetuated a lot of hurt, a lot of damage, because first of all, it didn't want to be talked about, because it was something like, oh, no, nobody talk about this. Keep this quiet. So it wasn't really addressed, or it was addressed with them and maybe the minister or whoever that was in charge. But I'm saying, I just saw how a lot of those things perpetuated a lot of damage, instead of understanding that sometimes people revert back to what is comfortable for them. Maybe the life that they were in was just too peaceful and loving, and people were together, and there was provision and all these other things. But sometimes people come from these chaotic backgrounds, and this is according to psychology. And because of these chaotic backgrounds, there's a need for them to go back to something similar to what they're familiar to. So I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm going back and I'm ready to examine and I'm looking at, because I understand that just because you were raised in something and taught something, it doesn't mean that it was right. Especially if you're a person that's about improving and changing and evolving and becoming more of what you're destined and supposed to be. So this is kind of just some few thoughts that I'm putting down, this morning, because like I said, if we're not willing to change and we're not willing to evolve, then what's going to happen is, because when I think about a scenario like that or an example like that, what generally is going to happen with a person like that is that is going to be an unhealthy relationship from that point forward, because the person that was betrayed, now they have the trauma from the betrayal, the trauma from, believing that God did this to them because of something they did, the trauma from all this stuff. Because trauma is something that affects our body. It affects our physical body. When you read Our Body Keeps the Score, whenever people go through traumatic experiences, it lays on us. It stays within our bodies. This is why going through a healing process and a healing journey is absolutely critical for someone that wants to have a new lease on life. So my thought on all of this is that, go back and re-examine a lot of things that you were raised in, because there's probably some things in there that when you look back on it now, you're going to be like, that was like insane. It was like really, really crazy. Because, again, you can't control what someone else does, what they're going to do or not do. You can be loving, you could be honest, you could be faithful, you could do this, you could provide, or you could be a good wife, or you could be you could be good and do all these great things. but it's all good. All this stuff stems back to people's hearts. Where's their hearts? You know, some people, they need a lot of approval and applause from other people. They need validation from everybody, which is part of having a poor self-image. You can't help someone have a great self-image, you know? So again, you know, this is just some thoughts that I'm putting down on video because I want people to go back and re-examine where they came from. Go back and re-examine what you were taught. You know, because a lot of times we were taught things from people that only had a certain level of understanding, that they didn't have the full picture to understand, you know, the psychological effects. They didn't understand, you know, how these things really affect our bodies, how these things really affect our minds. Because think about that. How would you feel? Because that's just suffering on top of suffering, on top of suffering, on top of suffering, on top of suffering. So how would you feel as an individual like that? And then would you be able to trust the person that you got to stay with and stay married to? Would you be able to trust them? And you think that that relationship is going to be exactly the same way it was? That you're not going to be always going around trying to figure out what this person's doing, where they're at, you know, who they're on the phone with, this, that, and the other, so on and so forth. There's results. There's things that are going to happen as a result of that. Because part of that book, Your Body Keeps the Score, whenever a person goes through trauma, and that's a traumatic experience for that particular individual, they're on high alert. You're on high alert for anything that resembles that event that has already taken place within your life. So if there's going to be any kind of a change or any kind of a transformation, it's going to be in other words, it's going to be very hard for that person to get past this, because all they're doing is they're revisiting a lot of the trauma, a lot of the nonsense, a lot of the hurt, a lot of the pain. There's not going to be any place of relief or release, especially when the mindset is